great thinkers, welcome back to the Think Great Experience. You are in for a treat today. I have been looking forward to this episode for a long time. In fact, when we first decided to relaunch our podcast, to share the Think Great Experience, Shawn Mingus came to mind. I knew we were going to have him on there. So Shawn, I'm very excited for you to be here and share your insights on greatness with us. And let me just tell the audience a little bit about you. You know, I've known you for many years now. As a coach, I've gone into US Bank where you've worked for 12 years now. We've also done some tag teaming on the philanthropic side as we support veterans, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But you know, you're an executive at US Bank. You run a team of leaders. I love that. You are also a martial artist and a veteran. And so, you know, could you just give us a little bit of your background? Maybe tell us a little bit about what you do at US Bank. I think that'd be a great way to kick us off here today.
Yeah. And again, thanks for having me on here. I don't know whether to thank you or curse you, because this is like not my favorite thing to do, is talk about myself. And I know I'm sure you feel the same way. We love to tell stories, you know, in reference to a conversation we're having with somebody to bring context and help somebody, but to sit and talk about Shawn Mingus in the third person is a little intimidating. And but that being said, so yeah, I've been with US Bank for 12 years. I lead a sales team there. We specifically help people attain and protect the dream of home ownership. It's a very honorable profession, being a banker. As you can imagine, trust is probably the most important thing. If you don't trust your bank, how are you going to put your money there or borrow from them? So we really spend a lot of time around developing our entire team, everybody on the team, as you've taught us about developing everybody as a leader, because leaders inspire trust, and trust is how we're gonna break that gap between, you know, people maybe being afraid to apply for a loan. There are thousands, if not millions, of people out there that are afraid to even apply. They're embarrassed, maybe something that happened in the past. So we have a lot of things that we do to help people come along that way. But that's what we're passionate about, is helping people make decisions and achieve and really protect the dream of homeownership.
I like that. You know, it's not just buying a home, it's helping somebody achieve the American dream. You know, what a great way of saying that. And that's really what it is. I mean, for most of us, it's our biggest purchase, and it brings greatness to our lives. But to work with people who feel it's part of our dream, I think that's a huge step. You know, you had mentioned at one point that you feel that the greatest part of your role at US Bank is developing leaders. And so you may have people on your team who don't have anybody reporting into them, but you're still developing them to think and act like leaders. Can you just share a little bit more about why you're focused? Here you are in the mortgage industry, but you're focused with your team on developing them as leaders. Well, tell us a little bit about your thought process behind that.
Well, I learned it in the military, the importance of development. And I thought I was really good at it until I met you, and then you enhanced it and took it to a whole new level. So I'm just going to quote you left and right here. You know, I think you said once that when you develop everybody on the team as a leader, you can guarantee results. So that is a powerful thing when you can guarantee results, and including my admin. She's a leader. She takes initiative. She does things for me I don't even know she's doing at this point. And I've often told her, I'd rather have you take initiative and make a mistake than not take initiative. So by all means, take initiative. And when you make a mistake, guess what? We're both going to learn from that. And we're going to get better and better and better. She does things for me that allow me to spend time doing this right now. And then our loan officers who specifically work with the home buyer, the customer, they didn't, you know, and oftentimes don't view themselves, Shawn, I'm not a leader. I don't have anybody reporting into me. I'm like, well, wait a minute. What are you doing? You're leading our customer through the most stressful. Some say it's worse to go see your mortgage banker than to go see the dentist, right? This is really stressful. The paperwork and the personal stuff that we get into, and divorces and bankruptcies and good and bad, and how much people are more apt to talking about their sex life than their finances. I heard that the other day from a wealth management banker. I can't quote the source, but it makes sense. Like, people are afraid to talk about their money because our entire ego is tied to how much money we have. So we're opening that Pandora's box and talking about everything. So if you're not leading the customer through that process, if they're leading the loan officer, then typically chaos happens. So we have spent a tremendous amount of time getting better and better at developing leaders and telling them why. The other thing too, you know, oftentimes I'll hear one of my teammates say, and I was coaching my daughter around this application that she had to turn in to become to get a recognition.
Yeah.
and she didn't know what to write. I said, why do you want this? I asked her, why do you want this, this recognition? And she went, so I want to help people. And so that helped his daughter. Like what we learn at work, we bring home. It makes us better parents. It makes us better in our community. You know, there are no boundaries. So
Right.
leadership to me, and you said it, is the answer to pretty much all of our problems. It's a leadership problem.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean, already here we are in the first 5 minutes of our discussion, and you brought up two powerful words, trust and initiative. I mean, and I would say that trust right now, after the year of this past year of the pandemic, and now we're going into a year of transition, which can be crazier than the pandemic. I mean, trust is up there. We hear it more and more and more now. People need a source of trust. And I love that, you know, you build leaders, and when you build leaders, you start building trust. And I've had the opportunity to work with your admin. I've had the opportunity to work with Katie, and she takes initiative. And you know, these are things that have to be developed in people. So yes, some people might take some more than others, but the fact is we need to be taught these things. And to do it in the work environment, you're absolutely right. How great is it to take things like trust and initiative and leadership home with you at a time when we need it the most? You know, just focusing on those traits. I think it just makes everybody better. And that's what I love about the leadership development component. It makes us better. But one of the things that I've discovered with you is how transparent you are with the team. If you make a mistake, you own it quickly. And I'm not asking you to share any mistakes here by any means, but you and I have had many, many phone calls where you do a lot of self-reflection as a leader. You do a lot of course correction, and you're not afraid to share some of that information with your team. How, in your opinion, how important, if we're striving for greatness during a worldwide pandemic, or striving for greatness during this transition phase coming up, how important is it for leaders to be transparent with their people right now?
Yeah, there's lots of quotes around this. You know, when you don't provide transparent communication, people will always assume the worst. Your teammates, you know, that you serve will assume the worst. When there's a lack of information, then what fills that lack of information is the word. That's just the way people's minds go. Ooh, yeah. The boss isn't talking to me, so there must be bad things happening.
Something's wrong.
So transparent communication is absolutely important, but it has to come from a place of humility. And I've talked often about this, that humility is so important, because we have to remind ourselves that we are going to have to admit when we make mistakes. There's nothing more powerful, and I can't think of a specific example, but I've had leaders in my past that have admitted when they've made mistakes, and they've done it publicly. And that's a very powerful thing when you say, I messed up here. I'm sorry, I let you down. I'm going to do better next time. And here's what I'm going to learn from this. That's a powerful message, because we all know we learn from our failures more than we learn from our success. It's in our DNA. It's just, you know, when you make a mistake, you're going to remember that mistake. You know, those negative experiences get implanted in our head, and we're going to learn from those experiences if we allow that to happen. So being humble and admitting mistake in front of our teammates. But I'd also add it, on top of being transparent, you have to be effective in the community. So you can be transparent and show your weaknesses, but if you get to a point where you're like, you know, then they start to go, what, you're being really transparent, Shawn, but man, you're kind of a mess. I don't know if even though you're being transparent, you know, I don't know if I know you're competent enough to follow you. So you have to be effective with that communication as well. And you taught me that whole concept around dynamic communication. To be effective, you have to let people know you care about them. Like, I care about you. I value what you do. And that's where really, you know, you can be transparent, but really making that connection is you've got to bring that effective communication. So it has to show, not only are you admitting your mistake, but here's the plan to prevent it from happening again. And here's how you're going to benefit. I'm going to bring you along. So it has to be interesting,
because, you know, you can be transparent to a fault where you can diminish trust, you can destroy it, but that transparency can also build it. And yes, you are absolutely 100% correct on the communication component right now. You know, I've taught on dynamic communication for a long time, and now we've added the communication movement, our new book, which is teaching people how to bring people together during these times of separation, how to use communication to attract people rather than repel people. And I think if you do watch the news, which we were talking earlier about staying away from the news right now, or go on to social media, most of the comments, most of the commentaries, if you will, really push people away. And I feel that as leaders, when we really harness our role right now, and it's needed now more than ever, we may be the only source of positivity in some people's lives. If they're watching the news, they can get bummed out. If they're listening to the politicians, they can get bummed out. If they could scroll through Facebook or LinkedIn, there's tons of negativity there. I think leadership right now is more critical than ever because people are fragile and they're tired after this last year. And we know we're going into a transition phase, which is even harder. I find it interesting when I ask a lot of leaders, what is one of their most important traits? You hear a lot of the generic answers. They're great answers, but you hear a lot of the answers that you expect to hear: integrity, vision, empathy. Your answer is humility. And I think I think that's a characteristic of leaders that most leaders don't embrace enough. I think we need to be more humble, especially right now. And let me ask you this, as a veteran, how have you taken the lessons learned from your time in the military? Maybe you could share a little bit about your background, what you experienced in the military. How have you used that to achieve greatness in your personal and professional life now?
Oh, it started at 17 years old. So I went to basic training at 17 between my junior and senior year in high school. So I came back my senior year of high school with a high and tight out of boot camp. And I think I got all straight A's my senior year. Now I had some easy classes in there, but I really learned, discipline and grit and getting up at 4 a.m, even when you don't want to get up at 4 a.m, doing guard duty when you're tired and making sure, hey, if I fall asleep on guard duty, people could die, and just the importance of the discipline of doing what you say you're going to do. My dad instilled a lot of that, the great values in me, but then you go experience with people from all over the country, all different walks of life, some speaking. We had a couple in basic training that didn't speak English. It was an experimental program. I believe was at Puerto Rico, but it was incredible. Yeah. This melting pot of young kids coming to basic training together, and then watching leaders emerge. And I made some really bad mistakes, and I made some really good moves. I got called out in front of the first sergeant once in front of the entire company, and he ripped off my stripe. And I said something, somewhat I regret. One of those things in the heat of the moment. It was an argument, and he was right, and I got called out. Man, that was a humbling. Talk about humility. I learned humility right then and there. I also, I would say, where humility really, I was 19 years old. I was a combat medic in a National Guard unit in Iowa. Nothing would ever happen, you'd think, right? And all of a sudden, we're on drill one weekend, and the alarm goes off, and there's a bunch of soldiers out on the firing range, and a man had a heart attack. And so I was one of 3 people that came to that heart attack, and his son was watching as we were doing CPR. And unfortunately, he did not survive. It was a massive heart attack. And we brought him back a few times. And I learned in that moment that we all put our pants on the same way.
That's right.
Or dresses, or whatever your shoes, or whatever you're putting on. And that really, even though I thought I was, at that age, you pretty much think you're invincible. It was a really strong lesson in humility.
We get those reality lessons as we go on, but that's a young age to have it. My backstory with Gina, my wife. She's been through cancer 4 times and actually suffered from cardiac arrest right in front of me as a result of all the treatments to fight cancer over the last 20 years. And she did die and then came back after 15 minutes. I mean, she did make a recovery, but there's those moments where, for me, true greatness is making it over this obstacle. I think at that point, it's not about the finances. It's not about the titles. It's not about anything. It's, you have this calling at that moment. And I know for me, sometimes people would say, how did you stay calm through things? And I go back to basic training in the Marine Corps. I think that taught us not only that we're going to get called out if we make a mistake, and called out quickly, by the way. Let's be very clear about this. They don't wait and think about it and deliberate. Your drill sergeants or my drill instructors or whoever it was, they don't wait to think about how we're going to feel. They call us out and they course correct quickly. But also when lives are at stake, I think you really are able to prioritize. And most people, they don't experience some of those things until very, very later in life. And I think miss some of those lessons. And I think that's for me too. I took what I took from the Marine Corps. And Shawn, how long did you serve?
So I was in the National Guard for just shy of 11 years. Through that ROTC, I got commissioned as an officer, an infantry officer. I spent pretty much every summer, though, volunteering. 2 to 3 months every summer, I was working for the National Guard or going to training. So I felt like I was on active duty, but it really was never, I didn't deploy. But you asked me what other experiences, of course, as an officer, I use what I learned in that time every day in professional life.
That's right.
The skills that I learned beyond just the humility piece, be able to act under fire and to react and respond appropriately and to lead people. And I use those skills every day. I just talked with a young man. We get to a point in life where a lot of people reach out. Hey, would you talk to my son about the military? And I had one of those conversations yesterday with a young gentleman, senior in high school at Edina. And I said, absolutely changed my life. If it's not just the money and the college tuition that you're going to get, but it will change your life forever if you take it on and you accept and you're open to learning. And again, I spent every summer volunteering for recruiting and marksmanship and additional training, and they spent a lot of money on me. They invested a lot of money into me, into not only training but development, as you know.
Sure.
Real life development where you're leading troops, going to Alaska, and I had an awkward situation where one of my troops made a mistake, and I caught him and I called him out, and it's one of those, you can't be people's buddies, you have to be their leader. And he did the wrong thing in the barracks, and we called him out, and he was a better soldier as a result.
That's right.
It would have been easy to have been. It was embarrassing to him. He had alcohol in the barracks. That was the reality.
Yeah.
And I made him throw it away. He apologized, and we destroyed it. And I could have been his buddy. It's no big deal. No, it is a big deal when little deals add up to big deals. So those are things that I learned at 20 years old, 21 years old, that I've taken with me throughout my life.
Isn't it incredible the experience that you gained in those short years we served? And I served less than you, 4 years, but to be taught things like justice and judgment and bearing and tact and just leadership as a whole, or respect, or just self-awareness. They teach you how to own up to it if you made a mistake, is priceless. I have the same conversations with young kids too. People will call me up and say, can you talk to my son? Can you talk to my daughter? And I always say, yes, the benefits are there. It's great. There's the GI Bill, the VA loan, health benefits. There's traveling the world, but it really is about who you become. And that does stick with you. I've always said, I got out of the Corps in 1991, but the Corps really, nor did I want it to. And when you think, you go, okay, well, did you work 30 years ago where you're still talking about that culture now? Right. How powerful is that? So, and that's where that bond and that camaraderie comes from. But, one of the things that I've learned about you is that you apply all of your life experiences into this pathway to greatness for yourselves, the things that you've achieved. And you're also a martial artist. And can you just talk a little bit about that path that you've taken, what you've accomplished, and how do you apply martial arts? Probably the discipline side. I'm guessing that you're not doing any moves on your people, but how do you apply the discipline of martial arts or some of the internal fortitude you've learned from that into the workplace or into your pathway to greatness?
Yeah, I often talk about, and I don't remember who quoted this, but it's a champion mindset. It's a champion mindset. And a champion mindset is one that is hungry and humble, coming back to that humility piece. So the martial arts has taught. So I did it at a young age. At 12 years old, I was my instructor at the time, the first youth he ever accepted. He only had adults, and I had to stand in front of him and give him a pitch and why he should let me join his class at 12, because I saw Kung Fu and Bruce Lee, and all I thought about when other kids were thinking about football players, I was thinking about Bruce Lee and Kung Fu. Yeah. That was just, those are my heroes, what I looked up to when I was a kid. I was never going to be at 5'8", I was never going to be a football player. But I could be Bruce Lee.
That's right.
So I started at a young age, 12. And then when I went to college, I just dropped it. Cool. My instructor moved, and it was kind of one of those things where I let it go. Well, fast forward, 20 some years, and my kids get into it, and they're out in the dojo working out. And all of a sudden I find myself back in uniform working out with them. So it was really my kids in my mid 40s, from 18 to mid 40s, that got me back into it.
Yeah.
And what I found is when I am training for a competition or a testing, I am much more engaged at everything. Mm-hmm. It is very much, it keeps me in the moment, because at any moment, I think I shared a video a couple months ago, I was doing some technique and came down and hyperextended my right leg or my left leg. I mean, it's a rookie move. Everybody knows how to land. Well, I didn't land properly, and I hyperextended my knee. So 2 months later, I'm rehabbing it.
Yeah.
it's getting stronger. But that's the humility piece, is that, man, I mean, there's one moment where I video myself a lot. So I watch for improvement. I watch for where I'm sliding. And there are a couple of videos where I'm thinking, man, I'm doing great. I'm ready to compete at the world level. I'm, over 50, by the way. I'm not competing with the young studs, but over 50, I want to be the best forms competitor in the world, over 50. And I have moments where I'm there and then I get injured. And it's that humility piece where, okay, in that moment, I stop and reflect on the plan. We've talked about that. You plan for mistakes and plan for hurdles. And when it happens, okay, what's the plan? Rehab it, get back on track, be humble about it, accept it, and be grateful for what you have, but never stop. Never stop.
Practice Taekwondo, correct?
Taekwondo, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Here's what's interesting is what I've learned over and over and over again is, we get into these mindsets. We've got to get into the zone. I find when I'm working out or hitting the gym or just trying to stay in better physical shape, then my goals are more easily hit. I can stay focused. I can overcome obstacles. I think that's part of the reason that physical component is there in the military so much, right? The mental and the physical side are so linked up. And I would say, martial arts is probably one of the ultimate combinations of physical and emotional or mental training. In fact, after I got out of the Marine Corps, they have a program, MCMAPS, Marine Corps Martial Arts Program, and I got to visit boot camp again many, many years later. I was invited out there, so I didn't have to get yelled at by drill instructors. It was a better visit to boot camp going back as a guest. But I did watch and participate in this Marine Corps martial arts program. So even the Marine Corps has enhanced and adapted martial arts into their combat training. And I think that just that discipline of the mind is so critical for everything else. Now, I have to ask you a question. Everybody has kind of a nickname for themselves. They got a way they look at themselves. You're a self-proclaimed road warrior. So when you say you're a road warrior, can you explain to the audience a little bit more about what that is? Did you even have that on your LinkedIn profile? You are a road warrior.
Yeah. Okay. So look, I maybe at most travel 50,000 miles a year. I know there's folks out there doing, so it's not the amount of miles I travel, but it's how I travel. When I travel, I pack my meals, I pack my protein, I bring bands with me. I brought anything shy of weights. You can't bring weights. I bring everything with me. So I make no excuse when I'm sitting in a hotel room. I can do planks. I can do band stretches. I have my protein with me. I have a little system where I have a little steamer I bring, and I steam my oatmeal every morning. Oatmeal and protein is the best breakfast for me. Just everybody's got their theories, but yeah, I get that oatmeal and that protein in me, and I can conquer the next 3 hours. So when I say road warrior, and when I went to Europe, my son and I traveled with backpacks, very efficient. So when I say road warrior, it's a mentality. It is, it's. I like to have comfort with me. I always had the heaviest rucksack when I was in officer training, infantry officer training. I had the heaviest rucksack just if I needed this little light, just if I needed this whoopee, just if I needed this scarf, just if I needed, and I had a lot of just ifs. And so, right. But at some point you gotta cut it out. So, so road warrior to me is being able to travel through Europe and with a backpack and have everything you need and be able to have a great experience on the trains. So yeah, that's one experience, but just really every time I travel, I make sure that I have what I need with me so that I can have that mindset that I can't stop training. I can't use that as an excuse.
And it's easy too. I do a lot of traveling. Well, let me say pre-COVID, I did a lot of traveling. And so I love that. I'm going to adopt that, not just because I love the Mel Gibson movie, The Road Warrior, but because I love that you can apply that to a mindset. I think I don't think enough people have titles of themselves that support their mindset. I'm really thinking about this right now. It's interesting. When you were in the Army, you were a soldier, but you were on payroll. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was a Marine, but I was on payroll. In the business sector, we have people on payroll, but we call them employees. Something they never, ever wanted to be in their entire life. Nobody went to the career counselor and when they were asked, what do you want to be when you grow up, Shawn? I know you didn't say employee. You might have said Bruce Lee too, but I think that title you gave yourself, Road Warrior, that inspires me. I think we should all have kind of a personal nickname for ourselves that puts us back into that mindset. I know from experience, it's so easy to go to a hotel, get checked in, and go right down to the restaurant and grab a meal that'll take you completely off your fitness game. It's so easy. So I love that. I hope everybody listening right now comes up with a nickname for themselves that they can actually repeat in public.
Let me add something for a public service announcement. And this is scary. If you travel a certain number, I think it's greater than 30%, all the bad things, risk factors go up: depression, alcoholism, overweight, diabetes, cancer, heart attack, stroke. They all go up. And, there's studies on it that when you travel, it's so hard. So you got to be a warrior about it. If you're fighting for your life, it's this concept of our body is like a sword. You've talked about the sword. Like, what sword do you want? Do you want a butter knife or do you want a katana? And a katana requires sharpening, and you got to keep it sharp.
That's right.
Otherwise, you put it on the shelf. It's a waste. So there's a reason why I do that. And I say road. I'm trying to set an example that others that travel far more than I do, you can still be healthy on the road. You can make better choices. You're going to feel better about it, and it feeds on itself. And you'll have better energy in those meetings because traveling brings out the worst in people. And it's usually because they get to the airport at the last minute. They're in a hurry. And it simply brings out the worst. That's why I get to the airport 2-3 hours early. I don't any longer want to be in a rush. I want to be patient around people. I want to have my gear with me. I want to make sure I'm confident. So when I travel, I can enjoy it, even when it's a business trip.
I think that goes back to what you said earlier, just being in the moment, right? Being there. These disciplines we take from our other experiences. I mean, here you are, you're in the mortgage industry, but you're a road warrior, you're a martial artist, you're a soldier. You're a father, you're a husband. All these titles are important because they affect our mindsets. Now, I do want to dive in on one of your experiences with greatness. This is pretty phenomenal. And when you were, discussing what greatness you experienced, and I hope you can elaborate a little on this. You were part of a team that shipped 16,000 pounds of resources to the Middle East. And I'm paraphrasing it because I'd rather it come from you, but that's an amazing level of greatness to hit. Can you tell us a little bit about what got you there, why you did it, and what that end result was? Because I know that trust is involved in that end result.
Building trust with the Afghans, in these villages. So it started in 2008, where I used to mentor a young lieutenant. He was actually a cadet, and I was a lieutenant. I mentored him. Well, fast forward, to 2008, that was 1990. So fast forward all those years, and he's now a battalion commander taking a combat battalion to the most dangerous place in Afghanistan along the Pakistan border. And when he told me that, I'm like, man, Steve, I feel like I should go with you. I feel like I let you down. And he's like, you had your time, you're past that point. But he said, what you can do is help me by send me some comfort items that I can give to the villagers who aren't going to be in a high altitude. He said, the last time I was there's kids running around without coats and shoes. So I said, I'm on it. And it was that sense of purpose to support him. It all started there. I developed a board. We basically launched a 501c3 within 4 months. We got it approved through the IRS. And we went out and we started collecting coats around the country with this mission and this sense of purpose. Next thing you know, my basement is filled. I can show you my piles of coats in our basement that came from all over the country. Nice coats, all donated to the tune of 16,000 pounds worth of coats. Well, then we had this problem. Well, how are we going to actually get them to Afghanistan? Because even though my brother is he's a high-ranking official in the Army, and I'm not going to name drop, there's nothing he could do. He went to people he knew, and all at that time, in 2010, all of the military transports were being used because there was a surge going on right at that time to defeat the Taliban. We all know how that ended up. So we had to find a way to get coats, an entire 40-foot Connex container to the front lines of Afghanistan. And if I didn't have a sense of purpose from that moment I said I'm on it to my friend, we were defeated multiple times. Then we had to raise the money to ship it. It cost $16,000 to ship that container from Minneapolis to Portland to down to LA. Then it went to Karachi, and from Karachi up to the border and across to a place called Jalalabad, and from there to Kabul, and from Kabul to the front line. That was the exact path. And it got stopped in Karachi for 2 months. Every day I called the border agents and I called my contact and I said, guys, you got it, because they didn't know what to do with these coats. They're like, what is this? You're not an NGO. We don't know who you are. You're sending them to a lieutenant colonel. Like, this is weird, and so every day I call, and it was a sense of purpose. This is a good thing. These are coats for kids. Check it out. You can go through every box. We had to label everything. So at the end of the day, it was that sense of purpose that otherwise I would have given up. The failure after failure, if there isn't that strong sense of purpose, you just give up. Like, I guess it's going to sit in Karachi forever. Well, after 2 months of badgering them daily and calling multiple people and copying SVPs and CEOs, and they finally released it. And it made it all the way to the front lines. And so they distributed the coats in February of 2011. And when my friend came back, he wrote a letter and said, this saved lives. This saved lives. We had 1/3 fewer IEDs than the unit prior to us because of the initiatives like this. They had a couple other things they were doing. But that goodwill that we allowed our soldiers to give coats to kids. And I have a picture of the first picture I saw were 3 kids with coats on. And I'm like, that's our neighbor's coat. Amber Sear donated that coat. And so, yeah, I get
that's
choked up
amazing.
talking about it. But to me, that was the greatest impact I've ever made in my life in terms of, other than having kids and, family.
Yeah.
Big impact.
It kind of leaves me speechless from the standpoint. I think when I hear a story like that, I realize I need to do some more. I have more to give. And Shawn, I'm going to assume that you are working at your job, during that time period.
Actually, it was the lowest point of our life at that point financially, and our family was struggling. And I'm like, we got to quit feeling sorry for ourselves. We got to help other people. And it lifted us out of this depression, kind of bad place. My wife got on board. My kids got on board. It's when you think about other people and helping other people, you stop feeling sorry for yourself. And then everything good happened after that.
But it's pretty amazing. We started a foundation, but it's here in the States. Yes, we awarded scholarships. We award scholarships to military spouses through the Think Great Foundation. But what a challenge you faced to get this equipment, to get all this gear to the Middle East during a wartime. And you're not in the military at that point anymore. That to me, that screams that purpose-driven individuals can accomplish greatness. I think that if you had said, hey, we're going to, 8 tons of equipment. If you had announced that out loud, I got an idea to collect 8 tons of equipment, send it to the Middle East, and have it distributed by our soldiers to villagers to help save lives, because I believe the villagers helped find those IEDs.
Yep.
Right. So they gave them some heads up on where to avoid.
That's right.
I just think if you announce that out loud, most people would say, there's no way you can do that. Maybe even looking back, you go, all right, man, there was no way. But you were focused. You had the warrior mindset for that project. And I feel you probably committed to being unstoppable.
Well, and there, I've often said, that when we have a clear enough why, a compelling enough why, I do believe the universe, however you want to define your spirituality, the universe conspires to help you. At that time, I don't know if you remember in 2010, 2011, because of the surge, a lot of the supplies were coming across the border by truck from Pakistan to Afghanistan, and 8 out of 10 trucks were being blown up or interdicted. Yeah. Our truck made it. They opened it up. They saw these coats. We put handwritten coats in Pashtun and Arabic, telling the story that these were donated to give to kids, and they made it. There's a bigger thing at play there.
Well, you touched down, and I can tell this is emotional for you. I can tell that this impact is huge. To save lives, right? Most people will say that they want to support our troops, wear the yellow ribbon. You did so much more than that by taking action. I think it's important to note that, you weren't on payroll for this. This was just purpose driven. So let me ask you a question. This last year has been absolutely crazy. A lot going on. And so now you've got the background in the military, martial artists, you got a mindset, this road warrior mindset. If I were to say 3 words to you, improvise, adapt, and overcome. 3 words I learned in the military. I heard those very early on. Anytime the Marines encountered a challenge, improvise, adapt, and overcome. How have you done that with your team in this last 12 months? It's probably one of the craziest 12 months businesses have ever experienced, probably communities and families as well. But as a leader with your team, what do those words mean to you as it relates to the day-to-day activities? Improvise, adapt, overcome. How have you helped empower your people through this time period?
It's fun too. I can make fun of you here a little bit because I know you're a student of etymology. the source of words. Like you do a lot of Latin words, but also the semantics, what words mean to us. And so I went back and I looked at the definition of this idea of improvise. And the first definition that popped up is to produce or make from whatever is available. So when COVID hit in March, we had nothing available at that time. We were all used to working together and meeting in person for sales meetings, recruiting meetings, loan officers meeting with customers in person, closing in person. And that was a Friday, I think it was March 19th. The following Wednesday, so on that Friday on the 19th, before it was even announced, I think it was when the NBA canceled the season. I said, guys, this is over. We're all going home. So I told the team on Friday, I said, be ready. We're all going home. Sure enough, we all took our stuff home that Friday. And on Monday, the company said, everybody's going home. That Wednesday, we had our first virtual happy hour. Before anybody heard of, I don't even know if it existed, but I'm like, my intuition was, guys, let's get on a video. I signed up for Zoom. And we had our first virtual happy hour on Wednesday, March 22nd or whatever the date was. The following week, we had a virtual happy hour with the entire team. And then we had a virtual coffee the next day in case if somebody just wanted to have coffee and not have. So we started doing virtual stuff immediately. We reached out so we improvised. We used a tool that I didn't even know existed on the 19th. And by the next week, we were using it to effectively engage people in person. Because still seeing your face, this is better than radio. I can see your face. I can see the hand gestures, how excited you are. I can hear your voice. I can see your eyes twinkle, your ears. This is all important stuff. And so having a happy hour, why not do it virtually? And it absolutely worked. It brought our team together. We were cheering each other. The other thing I did that Monday to improvise, I'd never done this, but I called every one of my direct reports and I said, I'm here to tell you it's going to be okay. And that's dynamic. It's going to be okay. And what do you need from me? And I took notes, called everybody that day. That was the first Monday. So it was really just knowing that we have all the tools. We just need to improvise, kind of like that old show on TV. That who was the expert at improvising? Whoever that show was. But
I know what you're talking about. That improvise, adapt, overcome, that mindset. I think you're right. You improvise with whatever you have available, and so much was taken from us.
But then the adapt piece is interesting because what I came up with as a definition is become adjusted to new conditions. And that's a really dangerous place to become adjusted to the new norm. We didn't stop. So I'd say species, the determining factor of whether they succeed or not is their ability to adapt. And adapt means is iteration. It's not adapt and then stop. It's iteration. So we got used to doing small iterations of adapting, failing, getting better at it, improving. We roll stuff out much. So what we did now as a result is we roll stuff out and fix it as we go. And I think that's where the world is going. That's where technology is. So for us, adapting was really that ability to adjust, but then keep adjusting. We have this saying, remember I told you I don't like the word pivot. I hate the word pivot. No offense to anybody, but it's so overused. It's like 10 years ago or 5 years ago, everybody was saying level set. And we want to level set. Well, that word, now it's pivot. We don't pivot. We have our head on a swivel. Because once you pivot, it's that mindset that I pivot and then I sit. No, you don't pivot and sit. You swivel and you swivel and you swivel. It's constantly, it's like that's martial arts has taught me that, right? That you can have an opponent coming in any area and your head is on a 360-degree swivel. So that was adaptation. I immediately learned that head on a swivel thing was absolutely, because there's disruption going on all around us.
That's correct.
And when there's disruption, you have to have your head on a swivel 360, not just what you see in front of you. What you can't see is the scary part.
That's exactly right. And then, I think that it leads to that third part, that overcome, that it's not just settle. They don't say improvise, adapt, and settle. Improvise, adapt, and become complacent. It's improvise, adapt, and you will overcome. You will become better on the other side. And I think that until you face a challenge, those three words could just be words. But as you go through a challenge, it really sharpens your blade. I mean, for Think Great, we've improvised, we've adapted, we've overcome. We went virtual fast too. Fortunately, it was our team. I mean, you've met, Jacob and Sapphire, and they jumped on board on the technology side and just got us up to speed, kind of put me in front of the computer and said, here, go talk. And no, don't click that one, click this one. And then, Sandy was rallying all of our clients to get us on board. And then Gina was, it's all new billing at this point. How do you handle this? I mean, it was a team effort. I think COVID-19 has shown us if we really have a team or not. And you shared when you went through our Leadership Link program, and if somebody's listening that doesn't know what that is, it's a 12-month deep dive into my leadership book, 12 chapters, 12 months with peers. So you have to be very transparent in front of your peers. And I think, Shawn, that was one of the highlights of that table that you went through, that executive table, was you actually applied the steps that were recommended every week, especially that constant communication, the getting offsite with your people. How important is it as you're achieving greatness or building your team or developing leaders? How important is that connection outside of the workplace, even if it's virtual? For some it might be virtual right now, but even just getting out and having a cup of coffee or just hearing that get off-site message. How did that resonate with your ability to build teams and hit these numbers and hit these levels of greatness that you've hit?
Yeah, that 12 months I didn't realize was preparing me as a leader for COVID. It was all the things that we implemented through that session, that 12 months. I put it all into place, and ultimately where we ended up with a team that collaborates. And that you can't. So that's another term that's thrown around. Hey, let's collaborate. Well, I don't think that's just a decision. There's a lot of steps that go into that, as you know. You wrote a book on that, so I know you're speaking to the choir. The first one is define what leadership means. So we had already gone through all those steps. So my team knew they could take initiative, and it's okay if they made a mistake. I wasn't going to hold it against them. I was going to correct them. We were going to fix it, learn, move on. I make a mistake, I'm going to correct it, fix it, move on. So we built all those steps up. So when COVID hit, the proof is in the pudding. When you say overcome, 2020 was my best professional year in 27 years, the best in my current role in the 7 years I've been in my current role. And my team came out, we came out on top in a very, very competitive group of colleagues. And we were recognized at US Bank. Our team was recognized as US Bank's top honor legends if possible. So the proof's in the pudding. The overcome piece is what we actually did with what you taught us in that 12 months and what we put into use. And that's ultimately getting to not just leading, but creating leaders that collaborate. And that's where to collaborate, you have to have trust. You have to have unified goals. Everybody has to feel like they've got something to gain from it. Our teams don't care about our goals. They care about what it means to them and how much you care about them. And that's what you really helped me refine. Like I said, I thought I was good, but then I became great through your program because you got it step by step. And I'm not here to, pitch your book, but it helped us step by step to get to that point. So when COVID hit, we were ready, and we didn't realize we were ready. How fortunate are we?
Well, and you graduated just, prior to the pandemic. So you went through that 12-month course. You came out as a certified coin carrying member. And you had already had the 4-part series. We do a 4-part series on the book too. That was in with, what do we have? 25, 30 people in your organization be developed as leaders who are typically kind of independent in the way they work.
Yeah.
You brought up an important part here. You're talking about, you get off site, you build up these relationships, you build trust. You mentioned that collaboration is just thrown around out there. I'm going to guess that collaboration was necessary during the pandemic, which simultaneously was your greatest year in business, but also too, collaboration, when you go back to the 16,000 pounds of getting these resources to the Middle East. How do you view collaboration? I mean, it's a big word. Everybody agrees it should be done. But, we talk about, I have a whole chapter on it where we talk about forming these think tanks. But how do you help facilitate that collaboration? Because I believe that greatness happens after collaboration. We collaborate, come up with some ideas, and we can move forward toward that collaboration. It's not like I can say, well, I'm going to achieve greatness without collaboration. I think it is the glue that holds it all together and inspires us to think differently. But can you just touch down on collaboration from your perspective?
Well, and you can, that I think you have the best definition of collaboration. You've nailed it. And we'll come back we'll come back to that in a moment. But I had to really share the vision of what the end result of, it's like, guys, here's what the end result of collaboration is. We want to get here because if we don't, we're going to fail. You know what's on the other side of collaboration? It's called innovation. And when there's disruption, and you said it many times too, during disruption, there's opportunity. Yeah. If you're in a place where you can seize on it. But you can't seize on it if you don't have a team, not as effectively, if your team is all working against each other. So let's say you have 2 area managers and they're both, competitive and they both want to have the best area. how do you get those two area managers to be selfless in times where they have to make decisions for the greater good, yet still be competitive? Because you want them to be competitive. You want them to be the best. You want to drive that competitive nature, but yet have them work together in a way that supports this, to the detriment of maybe their paycheck. Maybe their paycheck is a little bit less because they did something like this that helped the overall team. And it's not easy to get there. Like I said, we spent that year building to that point, and I have leaders that have sacrificed their paychecks. And in other words, it's like a chess game. We have to move some of the chess pieces around strategically so that the team can win, can achieve its overall goal. But at the same time, make sure you're taking care of the chess pieces too. They're important. And so when you have leaders that are willing to maybe give up a chess piece because it helps the overall good, which is what we do in the military. It's what we were taught to do. You have two platoons attacking the objective. This platoon might have to be the breacher. You know what it's like to breach a defensive position? It's not fun. I'd rather be sitting in the high overwatch position with the big gun shooting down, providing the supportive fire. But being that breacher, somebody's got to be the breacher. Somebody has to be the point man. Can you imagine being a point man in Vietnam in a patrol?
The odds were against you. Yeah.
Or how about a helicopter? So the point is everybody. So that's collaboration. My gosh, there were guys that volunteered. I want to be the point man because I don't want my buddy to die. I'm willing to do that. That's collaboration at the highest levels. And then you have everybody's engaged. That's where innovation comes from. So innovation is our future for all of us, including you. You innovated this year. We have to. If the minute we stop innovating, we're going to die in this disruption.
Right. So let me ask you this: we live in a world where we have a lot of cliches, a lot of popular sayings. Maybe more now than ever. But when I asked you about your favorite cliche, it was "Fortune favors the bold." I love that. And a lot of people use cliches again that are very, very common. You don't hear this one a lot. Can you just talk a little bit about that cliche, "Fortune favors the bold," and what it means to you?
So my oldest son was a sophomore in high school, and he was competing in skateboarding, had long hair, hanging out with all the skateboarders. And he told us his sophomore year, in fact, we found it kind of in an email somehow, that he wanted to be an Army Ranger. And so I confronted him. I'm like, "Son, you have no idea what you are asking." He's like, "I'll prove it to you." And then he came up with this motto, "Fortune favors the bold." Before you go to basic training, you go through some kind of training. Your recruiters set up training here locally.
Sure.
And they chose him as the leader, and he came up with this and this was before anybody even. I know that a car company came down with that same "Fortune favors the bold," but I had never heard it before. Yeah. And I thought it was brilliant. I mean, you think about. And now he's an Army Ranger serving at the highest levels in the military. He's with a tier 1 unit. He has absolutely done everything he set out to do, because you have to. Fortune is not necessarily money. Fortune could be spiritual well-being. It could be physical well-being. It could be, I believe the universe, there's an abundance. That's one of my core values, is abundance. There's enough for everybody. We don't have to kill each other for it. There's enough for everybody. Why can't we figure that out? And there's enough fortune for everybody, but you have to be bold to take it. It's not going to come to you. So bold also is not reckless. Bold is smart. It's decisive. It's bold. I don't know how you break it down any other way, but you have to become an Army Ranger and say you're going to do that. That was bold at 16 years old. And he now has the good fortune that in the 7 years he's been in the Army, he's probably received 20 years worth of training and experience. I mean, he's been serving at the highest. And so he has the good fortune of all this experience because he was bold. And how many kids his age said, "I want to do the same thing." And they along the way, they're medically disqualified. They quit. Right. Something happened, bad luck. They weren't right. They realized they weren't right. They bowed out. He's still there fighting at the highest levels.
It's what I love about that cliche, which is his mantra, right? His motto, right? It's moved from a cliche to it's been defined, and he owns it. And I think that we see too many cliches used too loosely. I love that you defined what, your definition of fortune and also bold. And I think that's one thing I learned in the military too. They didn't just throw words around because they sounded good. They had meaning to them. And, I find it funny because, you hear a lot of things, like if you got guys that work out or gals that go to the gym, you'll hear that old phrase, "No pain, no gain." And the older you get, I agree. I don't want any pain, but I want the gain. And I think there's smarter ways to get there. The same thing, you'll hear people say it all the time. You need to max out. I'm a big believer that max out leads to burnout. And too many people, they go full throttle and they quickly lose out to somebody who's paced themselves out. in Taekwondo, you are a black belt, correct?
Yes.
And you didn't get that overnight. That wasn't about maxing it out. Now, I'm not saying there's not times where you give it maximum performance. I'm not saying there's times where you don't magnify your performance. I prefer to magnify things because we can be in control of that. But it's not about getting the black belt that first week or the first month, which you're not going to get it anyways. So if you were shooting for it on that level, it actually may be to your detriment. I'm assuming, and I've never done the martial arts, aside from getting tossed around back in boot camp when I was a guest there. I haven't done martial arts anywhere near the level you have, but I'm assuming this is something that discipline compensates or takes over for the max it out type of mindset, where the discipline helps you to go the distance.
Yeah, you bring up a really great point. It's a life lesson. A good friend of mine, Scott, I go back 10 years ago, I used to lift 3 hours a day, 6 days a week, and I was shredded. And I wasn't getting bigger. And I'm like, Scott, what's going on? I'm eating, I'm working out at a world-class level. I'm on a program. I'm following the Wendler symbol. What isn't working here? I'm a hard game. He's like, Mingus, it's like this, you lay out in the sun and you can only get so much sun and you have to go in. You can't get a week's worth of sun in 10 hours. You have to do it 1 hour a day over 10 days. And lifting is no different. If you try to get 10 hours worth of lifting done, all at once, you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to burn out. So you have to, the discipline is, now I know I limit my kicks per week. I had a good friend. I have so many great friends that give me advice. Mingus, stop kicking so much. You can't kick 1,000 times. So I count my kicks now. I do not allow myself to kick more than, and I mean, like full force kicks, not, there's different ways you chamber and you kick, and,
Right.
Whether it's a bag or in the air or against an opponent or breaking a board, but I limit the number of kicks. I count each one of my kicks. And I do think of you oftentimes in my early morning workouts where you said you got to find the love in the repetitions, and I find the love in those repetitions, and I don't start until I'm in that moment of love. And so I only get 10 kicks on this side. I'm going to love every one. And I love that moment. I don't think about anything else. So the discipline really is knowing our limits and knowing it's like a sunburn. After a certain point, you're just burning skin. It's going to hurt you. You can't do it all at once. Work is no different. Pace yourself at work. I now working at home has been the best. I can work intensely for 2 hours, lay down, take a nap for 15 minutes, go eat lunch, come back, and another hour, knock it out, take a break, read something. I do it in chunks now, and I'm way more productive now than I've ever been.
Yeah. But I think that's what's important about this time period. That's where that discipline kicks in. I think for some people working at home, I mean, you can accomplish greatness without having to drive anywhere. For some people, they lack that structure. But I think that structure of being in the workplace, if you have the discipline to work from home, I know for me, I wrote a book during COVID. I can't tell people that, you really need to master your time. And then they say, what did you do during the pandemic? And I said, well, I binged watched Game of Thrones. And it's not going to fly, right? And I haven't binge watched Game of Thrones. I'm trying to think of what I did binge watch The Mandalorian, but there was only 16 episodes. But I still wrote a book because I think we have to practice what we preach. And I think there's just so much logic to that. Now, I want to ask you, if you have any advice for our listeners on achieving greatness, whether it's, doing something for the troops, doing something for the good of humanity, doing something great in their business, just their personal life, do you have any words of wisdom that they can take with them and say, this is helpful. Here's something I can apply right now as I strive for greatness in my life.
I always come back to this, and I know you've evolved from a why to a who, and who's important. In fact, I did a post on Facebook who my who were. So that was from you. You're my who. No, here's my answer to this.
I understand.
At the end of the day, if we don't have a meaningful why, we're going to be interested in our goal, not committed. And I know I'm using some catchwords at some previous motivational speak, be interested, not committed. I know these are buzzwords, but I like buzzwords because I always come back to, am I interested in this goal of being this or doing this, or am I committed? And I think that I know the difference personally. And the reason why I was able, through the course of a great team bringing these coats to Afghanistan, is my why was so compelling. The universe would not allow me to fail. It was going to happen. And how do we find that why? It's a series of exercises that I've been through. I learned this technique a long time ago. And I don't know if you and I have talked about this, but we write a goal down. We write this goal, whatever the goal is, we write it down. And this is really hard to do. This is like therapy 300 series. Write the goal down. What's the goal? Like, I want to grow my team by 26% this year. And maybe it's more a bigger goal. I want to be a world champion.
Sure.
We should ask ourselves the question, why? And oftentimes the first response you're going to find, Eric, and I've done this in live audiences with hundreds of people. I have them share one of their goals and I ask them, why is that important to you? 99% of the time it's ego. Well, I want to be successful. I want to make a lot of money. I want others to view me. I want to be respected. I want to make an impact. These are things that are ego oriented. But the key thing, and it's the way our brain is designed, we have to get to our reptilian part of our brain, which is where the real desire comes from. We get away from emotions and facts and figures, and we get to where we're driven by our reptilian part of our brain. We have to ask ourselves the question again, well, why is that important? Why is success important to me? Well, I want to make a lot of money. That's still ego. Why do you want to make a lot of money? Well, because I want to be able to take care of my family. And that's the who. But at some point, it has to be internally about me first. It's why when the bag drops down in the airplane, you put the air on your, you do that first, then you take care of the person next to you. If we don't know our internal motivation and our why inside, what it does for me, then how can I ultimately help my family? And I've been through this exercise hundreds of times. I've done it in live audiences, and I've gotten people, I said, when you get to a point where your why gives you goosebumps, then you know you have the right why, and don't stop until. So you keep asking yourself. And I had one of the mentors that he did this over the course of a year. He kept asking himself, why do I want to do this? And it took him a year to get to it. And he ultimately found out it was about his childhood and how he never felt like he was good enough. And he was tearing up and he was like, I am good enough. I am enough. He got to a core root into his DNA, like into that reptilian part of his brain. And he did something no man had ever done at 53 years old. He went through Navy SEAL training called Kokoro. It's the civilian version of Navy SEAL Hell Week. He did it at 53 years old. His name is Joe Stump. And he did this 53 or 54 years old. No one had ever done it. And guess what? After he did it, kind of like Roger Bannister, a couple other guys followed after that. But his why
once
was
he
so
broke the
compelling.
the 4 minute mile, then everybody else did it, right?
And everybody, yep.
So here's what I'm hearing is somebody has this idea of greatness. They have to start asking themselves better questions.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you bring up goal setting and making sure you have your why there. I remember when I was in the recruiter's office. So this is way back in 1987. And you tell them you want to enlist and they say, why? They ask you why. Why do you want to be a Marine? And they start to peel the layers of ego off, right?
And be a tough guy, the uniform, all those,
all that stuff, right? And then it becomes, can you look after the people to your left and right? And so I know the military is focused on the why for 245 years. And even when I ask people now, and I'll ask our listeners this, if you have a goal, why do you need to accomplish this? When I do strategic planning or just goal setting training, I ask that same question. They'll tell me the goal: lose weight, earn more money, start a business, launch a foundation. I always say, what's the purpose of the goal? What's the purpose of the goal? You got one goal, but what are the purposes? And you can have multiple purposes. For me with the foundation, it was, well, I want to award scholarships to military spouses. I want to honor the sacrifice they've made. I want to help enrich military families. I want to make their livelihoods better. I found that for one single goal, you can have multiple purposes or multiple whys. And then I think, just like you said, you got 16,000 pounds of supplies to the Middle East. Still blows me away that you did that. And at the end of the day, there was that battalion commander, your who, that it would help him and his soldiers to save lives. I think that what we do is important. How we do it is important. I think we have to ask ourselves those deeper questions of why am I doing this and who does it impact? And then we become unstoppable. I mean, that's how I feel. I don't know about anybody else listening right now, but I feel like after this call today, after this podcast with you, Shawn, and I knew this would happen, I feel like I can go conquer the world. Maybe I scheduled you as a guest for my own selfish reasons.
You wake up that way every day, Eric. You're very humble, which is great. But maybe I was just a little spice on top of that. Whatever you're.
Awesome. Shawn, there's people in your life that cause you to stand up a little taller, that cause you to take a little more action. And that's the impact you have on me. That's the impact you have on people who hear you speak. And I'm confident it's the impact you have on your team, because I've spoke with some of them. You focus on bringing out the better parts of us. And for that, I thank you. I appreciate that. I'm very confident in the fact that our levels of greatness are going to be accomplished based on the people we associate with and the information we absorb, right? So we got to be very careful of those two things. That data consumption and the surrounding ourselves with the right people is very, very critical. You always give me great info, and I always feel better surrounding myself with Shawn Mingus. I can't tell you how grateful I am that you took time out to be with us today. I hope that we can do a part 2 to this, because I know people are going to want to hear more. I want to just say thank you, Shawn. It's always a pleasure. If you have any final thoughts, we'd love to hear them.
All I would add is, when you've been a mentor of mine now for going on, I'm officially 3 years. And what I heard this recently about mentorship, it goes both ways. We shouldn't pick a mentoree unless it has to go both ways. The perfect mentor-mentoree relationship is where we learn from each other. I had 2 actually young gentlemen I talked with yesterday about their careers, and the second one was a cup of coffee. And I learned from him some things. I was inspired by him at a recent college graduate, with the way he was looking at the world and how honest he was being with himself. And I could mentor or coach somebody like that, because I'm going to get something out of it. If it's only a one-way street, oh man, I think the best mentor. So as much as what you just said, 10 times back to you, brother.
I mean, I look at it this way: in life, different than sports, we are coaches and players at the same time when it comes to life. And we need to surround ourselves with great players and great coaches and learn from everybody. As a business coach, I get hired to coach one-on-one. I get hired to coach teams, coach entire organizations. It's always good for me. I always learn. So, I'm committed to becoming my own road warrior. I'm committed to getting that mindset sharper every day. You inspire me. And I just want to encourage everybody to become your own road warrior. I want to encourage everybody to lead your people and to develop them as leaders, and to have these levels of greatness. Shawn, I know you have some amazing goals for you and your team for the year. I would love to have you back on and talk more about those goals and what you're doing to accomplish those. I just want to encourage everybody to subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to Think Great Experience, and pass this along. We are gathering insights from amazing people like Shawn Mingus, and sharing those insights all over the world so people can achieve their levels of greatness. Shawn, again, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate everything that you do. And most of all, I appreciate your friendship.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you as well. Great time.
Yeah, thank you.